When a mother of 3, Diane, takes her unresponsive 23-year-old daughter, Sarah, to the ER, everyone is puzzled by the life that had been suddenly changed forever. However, as details about the unpleasant events leading up to her hospitalization unfold, it becomes clear that someone is not being truthful about what happened to the young adult. Diane had just been invited over for some fact-finding by the police. The detective asks for some backstory on Sarah, and she tells him just about what happened up until the time when she was found unresponsive in her room.
How did all that come about?
She started Saturday. She complained of a little headache, and her stomach was upset, and she threw up a couple of times, and that was it. And then her normal routine is she stays up all night and sleeps during the day. So I didn't think any about it until Sunday afternoon, and then I couldn't get her to wake up. She didn't respond to me, so we took her to the emergency room.
According to her, Sarah had complained of a headache, had an upset tummy, and was throwing up. While these are medical symptoms of ill health, Diane says she didn't take these very seriously, as the symptoms didn't appear to be threatening. She tells the interrogator that she retires to bed later that night and doesn't remember when Sarah went to bed.
What time was it she went to bed?
Oh gosh, I don't know. I really don't know, because I go to bed at 10 at night, and she's usually still up.
Okay.
It turns out that Sarah had a habit of working late into the night and sleeping during the day. The next morning, she and her 2 other daughters leave for church and return at about noon. They discover that Sarah is still not up from bed, and after a few hours decide to check up on her. Surprisingly, she and her other daughters discover that Sarah is unresponsive.
Me and the other girls went to church, and we left her sleeping.
Okay.
And then I came home, and she was still sleeping. And then maybe a couple hours later, I went to check on her, and we just couldn't get her to respond or answer or anything.
And after trying to unsuccessfully revive her, they're forced to take her to the ER.
So you brought her to the ER?
Yeah.
Unfortunately, this doesn't do much, as the 23-year-old is now faced with terrible medical complications. Upon medically diagnosing her, Diane says the hospital couldn't come up with an exact cause of her current medical state, nor are they able to say what she was sick of.
What did they say at the hospital?
Basically, she was as sick could get.
But no idea what it was?
We had no clue.
However, Diane is of the opinion that something must have happened to her daughter, stemming from her medical condition. It turns out that Sarah is bipolar, and so Diane says she assumed that she might have overdosed on some of her medication.
With her medical background, she's bipolar.
Okay.
My first thing is, did she get into something? Did she try to overdose or something?
After getting home, she tells the detective that she checked Sarah's prescriptions and found them intact, thus ruling out the possibility of an overdose.
When I got home from the ER, I checked her medicine, and she had plenty of pills left, so I don't think she OD'd her medicine, but I have no clue.
The detective listens keenly as he notes down some of the things she says. Diane's family is grieving this tragic event, but something bizarre lurks around. The present medical condition of Sarah is not the first wave of ill luck to hit the family. It's actually the 3rd tragic event to hit the family. In the space of a year, Diane had lost her husband and a 22-year-old son. Strangely, all of them had the same symptoms as Sarah just before they passed on as well. This is one coincidence too many, and the investigators will stop at nothing to uncover this mystery. The detective continues by asking if Diane suspects her daughter could have had some ideas of harming herself. She responds by saying that Sarah had toyed with the idea of slashing her wrist at some point, but that never happened.
If she wouldn't have, obviously because the pills were there, if she wouldn't have overdosed on pills, you know what else she might have done?
She's talked about in the past about cutting her wrist, but as far as other ways, I have no clue.
Okay,
She's
but obviously
really never
she didn't.
said anything,
But obviously she didn't cut a wrist.
No,
Okay.
no.
Again, the interrogator continues to ask if there's a possibility that Sarah's condition was not just a result of some random sickness, and if she was possibly poisoned or poisoned herself. Diane says that this is not likely, as there were really no items at the home that could have led to the kind of internal damage they found when she was examined in the ER. All of her organs had shut down, and there was massive organ damage, including damage to her brain.
If she did take some cleaners or something, could that essentially...
Well, I can see that hurting the kidneys, but that wouldn't cause her brain. I mean, she had a brain bleed.
Oh, she had a...
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
She chips in that the most dangerous items in their home are cleaning agents, but there's no way that the cleaning agents could be responsible for her daughter's fate. Periodically, she chuckles at what she presumes is the foolishness of thinking that her cleaners could be responsible for what happened to Sarah.
What if the cleaners, if that was the case, would...
I would think even that something in there would show up.
How would that show up?
I don't know, whatever chemicals are in there.
This is not the kind of reaction to expect from someone whose daughter is struggling for her life in the ER. From all indications, Diane, who is a trained nurse, is aware of the implication of using chemicals. She also tries her best to stay away from discussing any kind of questions that brings up the possibility of chemical poisoning. This is where things take a twisted turn. After the sad incident with Sarah, the cops decide to conduct more tests on Sarah. They also ask for more tests to be carried out on the deceased samples of Diane's husband, Mark, and her late son, Sean. It turns out that during an autopsy, not all samples are used, so it's easy to request further tests. These further testings had revealed that the report they had given about the cause of Mark's demise was not accurate. Diane had, for some sick reasons, begun to introduce antifreeze ingredients into his drinks in the months leading to his demise. The detective continues to ask some specific questions about what she would do if she found out that there was evidence of chemical poisoning in the further test carried out on her departed family members. Diane deflects the questions by saying she doesn't know how she would react if they found strange chemicals present in the samples sent to the labs.
If it would come back that there was something in there like that, how would you explain that?
I don't know.
The detective asks how much her husband and the rest of her are worth by insurance, and she tells him. It all comes up to over $80,000.
What was Mark's life insurance policy like?
He only had $20,000. That was it.
Okay. How about Sean?
Sean only had $15,000.
What about Sarah?
Sarah only has $15,000, I believe.
Rachel?
And Rachel has $15,000.
And Brianna?
Has $15,000.
Okay.
He asks if she was able to claim the insurance benefits of her husband and son, totaling $35,000, and she tells him that she did. With her husband's money, they moved to a better neighborhood, but she had not spent the money she got from her son's demise as she was saving it.
And you were able to get the money from Mark and Sean's, correct?
Mhm.
Okay.
It took a while, but
So, yeah, but you
finally.
didn't, right. And what did you do with that money?
With Mark's, we were able to move into a better neighborhood.
Right. How about Sean's?
With Sean's, I haven't even... Right now, it's still in savings because I haven't quite figured out what to do yet.
Okay.
Diane further reveals that although she was married to Mark and loved him till his last days, he was not a responsible father.
He was running around and he would drink and smoke pot, and even with all his faults, I still loved him.
She was really the breadwinner of the family and had no support from her husband or any of her older children. Some of the puzzles began to come together. As a working mother, having to bear the burden of her husband and it is possible that Diane might have reached a breaking point. Mark spent his day drinking. Sean was physically challenged and needed lots of assistance getting by each day. As a result, he had no job to contribute to the financial fortune of the family. Sarah, as an adult, also refused to get a job. She was a night crawler who slept in during the day and spent her time with friends or being busy at night. As much as the detective tries to get her to own up to her part in what must have happened to Sarah, Diane simply refuses to. At this point, the detective begins to appeal to her sense of morality and asks that she does the right thing by coming clean with the truth. He makes her understand that it's possible to feel overwhelmed sometimes, and that she'll be doing herself a great deal of good if she tells him what really happened. Diane then begins to speak about her relationship with Sarah. She tells him that her daughter was a difficult child to raise.
Sarah's a difficult child to deal with.
I understand.
Sarah's sense of irresponsibility was beginning to get to her as a mother. Diane had spoken to her on a number of occasions to get a job and to really put herself out there. For someone who wanted to go to college, Diane says her daughter was doing nothing about it.
I've been kind of putting pressure on her to, you need to get out and get a job. Your college bills are coming due.
It's obvious that Diane had been stretched to the limit. Did this make her crack? Furthermore, she tells the detectives that although these were the challenges she had with Sarah, she never did anything to hurt her.
As far as did I do something to her, I didn't do anything to her.
At this point, the detective is forced to tell her some shocking discoveries they had made in their time of investigation. He tells her that they had become concerned following the third tragedy that struck the family, and so they asked for multiple tests to be run on all three victims, Sarah, her dad, and Sean's samples. Shockingly, they discover similar chemical compounds in the samples. This could only have been done by someone with great knowledge of chemicals. The detective appeals again to her moral compass by asking that she tells him why she did what she did. He says that this will help her forgive herself, and that the people who eventually get to hear about her might forgive some of her crimes, since she committed them at breaking point.
So you can tell me so we can get it all on the table. It'll be that weight that'll be lifted off your shoulders, because I know people that, especially good people like yourself, that walk around and carry this kind of stuff, carry these kind of burdens. So many times just talking about it, to get it out there and say, here's the deal, I did this because I had all this going on. And then it'll be a relief to be able to talk about it, to get it off your shoulders, and then to help with the forgiveness and the healing process.
Diane appears to know that she's been cornered. The fear of jail terrifies her, and she is sure that there is no more out of her lying. The detective prods her to go ahead. He tells her that he understands her present fears. However, he wants her not to think about jail, but to think about her reputation, which will be left in tatters if she doesn't tell the truth.
You do. I know you're afraid of going to jail, but you shouldn't even be thinking about that right now.
I know.
With this, Diane begins what she calls a confession. She tells the detectives that she noticed that her husband and son were taking antifreeze, and she didn't respond to their emergencies when they needed it most. From her statement, she appears to have initially been unaware of the harm they had been doing to themselves. Eventually, when she did, she delayed helping, as the thought of them no longer being all up in her face appealed to her.
I knew they were drinking antifreeze, and I was so mad at them, I didn't want to take them in. I delayed.
And why'd you delay?
Because I was mad.
If her irresponsible husband and her overly dependent were gone, that would be a sigh of relief. Although now she admits that she wasn't ignorant of what happened to her son and husband, her statement is not true, and there is more to the story. The detective again reminds her to come clean with the whole truth. He knows that she is not telling the truth, and he lets her know that there will not be a way of escape for her until she tells the truth.
But Diane, right now is not the time to tell me things that aren't true.
He tells her that he is aware that she knew that her family members were drinking antifreeze because she was the one actually giving it to them by spiking their sodas. At this point, Diane grows quiet, but eventually admits to it.
Diane, you knew that they were drinking antifreeze.
Mm-hmm.
You knew that. They didn't. We both know that. You knew, Diane, that they were drinking antifreeze because you were giving it to them.
I didn't know what else to do. I really didn't.
I understand.
It turns out that she had help. One of her daughters, Rachel, had helped her mother to carry out these evil acts against her siblings and father. Although Rachel initially denied involvement, a journal documenting her role was found in the house. Diane had become frustrated with her family members and decided to put an end to their lives. Starting out with little doses, she steadily increased the quantity of the dangerous chemical until they each passed on, and Sarah ended up in the ER battling for her life.
Mark is the first one. There's nobody before Mark, not in your past life or not in, okay, Mark's the first one. And it just got started. You said you hated his guts and
I just
you
couldn't take it
couldn't take it anymore. And so you did some research on the internet about antifreeze poisoning. You were aware of, the taste and things of that nature, like you said. Then you ordered some antifreeze, and then you gave it to him for a few days before it finally started to kick in and work. Okay. And then with Sean, you said we talked about he just became such a pest and bothering you, always interfering, things of that nature. And you said it took a couple days, right? Before it started to kick in on him. And then with Sarah, you talked about, she wasn't getting a job, and then she had these student loans, and you were going to end up having to pay for them. She wasn't working, and you said you guys argued a lot. Was there anything else more, or is that pretty much?
That's pretty much.
And you just had it with her as well.
Rachel is arrested and tried. She gets a life imprisonment judgment with a possibility of parole after 42 years, while Diane gets imprisonment without the possibility of parole. Sarah survives the assault done to her by her mother and sister, but is permanently impaired and now has to be assisted to go about her day. If you enjoyed this video and would like to see more stories on true crime, then be sure to subscribe to our channel. This way, you'll be notified every single time we upload new videos. Thank you for watching.